First came Sailor Moon, a liberally creative adaptation of Naoko Takeuchi's beloved manga. Next was Revolutionary Girl Utena, the classic Yuri epic that engrossed a generation of die-hard anime fans. Then came Mawaru Penguin Drum, an allegory of huge proportions about love, loss, and most importantly, survival. If you're a fan of any one of the shows I just mentioned, then you already know the one link binding them all, the visionary director Kunihiko Ikuhara. Starting his career with now beloved adaptations and moving on to create his own original works, Ikuhara has already etched his name firmly into the annals of anime history. So what would happen if he took all of the themes he loves to work with, homosexuality, love, society, and weave them through a single, like Penguin Drum, allegorical narrative? Well, what we got in 2014 was a deceptively adorable series called Yurikuma Arashi. Is this yet another Ikuhara hit, or is his best work already well behind him? One day, the distant planet of Kumaria exploded, showering the Earth in its fragments. This caused the world's population of bears to turn on the humans, who built a wall of severance to keep the ferocious bears away. Our story picks up as two bears make it past the wall and begin attending the Arashi Gaoka High School disguised as humans. Inspired by revenge, Kuriha Tsubaki swears to hunt down and kill the entire bear population. But as long as she refuses to back down on her love, the invisible storm will be coming to exclude her. Ikuhara's trademark symbolic and allegorical storytelling makes a return, but just knowing that alone for non-Japanese audiences is not enough to be able to interpret what this show is about. I realise that I am no social scientist, neither do I have any experience with Japanese society in any way, shape or form. I can only collate what I have heard concerning this show's inspirations, so here goes. Yurikuma Arashi is fundamentally about the segregation and persecution that lesbians go through in Japanese society today. When girls are very young, it is considered normal for them to love each other, but loving other girls is also considered a phase for them to grow out of when they reach adolescence. They are expected to fall in love with and marry a man, and those who don't grow out of this phase, as it were, tend to stick out from the crowd. Something the Japanese society also values is the idea of groups of people coming together to achieve a singular goal. In other words, conformity. The people who don't conform to social cues stick out, and since individualism is frowned upon in Japan, they end up being ostracized for it. This is the underlying, widely accepted reality of the country's social structure. There's also this stereotype for lesbians that exists in anime and manga, which is the proud sexual predator, hence the presence of bears in this particular story. This brings us to Yurikuma Arashi itself, a show that presents an exaggerated, yet stark image of the way lesbians are treated in Japan. While it isn't a very localization friendly story, it is still a brilliantly told and unique one. All of what I've just told you isn't spoilers for the show, it is the pre-existing notion that the story uses as a jumping off point. Without at least that tidbit of cultural understanding, Yurikuma Arashi is a very confusing experience. That being said, once you have a grasp of that knowledge, you'll recognise just how perfectly the central theme is handled. All of the allegories tie into this theme in one way or another, and at the very start, when you're just starting to figure it all out, you can feel overloaded with allegories to get under the skin of. This is a part of the reason why I'd never recommend binge watching this show. It's something that you need to step away from every now and again to digest all that information, at least in the first half. You get the same kind of enjoyment out of an Ikuhara series as you do out of a murder mystery, putting the pieces together and trying to figure out exactly what's going on, in an abstract sense. It makes you feel smart whenever you make a deduction that turns out to be right. Even without that timeout, I suppose you can still vaguely understand what's going on because the story works on a more emotional level like Disney's Fantasia, rather than a strictly logical one. This show doesn't completely lose itself in that though, as it remains entirely consistent with its own internal logic. Ikuhara is a very good director, and Yurikuma Arashi is no exception. There are so many shots packed with symbolic detail, so much that you end up finding something new every time you rewatch it. From big, extravagant symbols down to a detail so minute as the shade of a character's tie. Ikuhara has a crystal clear vision for the series, and knows exactly how to do that vision justice in a visual medium. Especially for an anime, this show's narrative is very visually dependent, with dialogue almost playing second fiddle to the array of imagery, shot composition, and symbolic representation. The aesthetic of the visuals is somewhere between unbearably adorable adorable and softly erotic. Yurikuma Arashi tackles some dark subject matter like rape, systemic oppression, and homophobia, all hidden behind an adorable facade, betrayed only by symbolism. There's even a piece of body horror toward the end, again portrayed as adorably as it possibly can be. At the other end of the candle is how erotic the show can be, an element of the aesthetic that doesn't outstay its welcome. The eroticism is there to betray the show's sexual undertones, and to portray spirituality as anime classically does, in the nude. There are a few flaws to this series though. There's a certain naming convention among the cast that makes it extremely obvious that they're going to turn out to be a bear. Although this works if you interpret it as they've made their sexuality an intrinsic part of their identity, it's still a killer for plot twists further down the road. Speaking of characters who turn out to be bears, one of them thinks to herself about how awful it is for bears to be hiding in the school, but she turns out to be a bear, rendering that entire thought meaningless. This happens in the game Heavy Rain too. You play as a character who turns out to have been the killer all along, but throughout the game you can listen to his thoughts about catching the killer. It's sheer dishonesty on the story's behalf. Besides the vague, intangible threat of the invisible storm, we do end up getting a few villainous characters to chew on. These villains often present a refreshingly darker side of love. Sadly, they never last for very long, and are only just gapped widely enough to stop us from thinking they're coming in and out through a revolving door. Although the major, actually unfortunate flaw with this series is its anachronistic storytelling. The story is told out of chronological order. We jumped on board just when Ginko and Lulu started attending Arashigoroga Academy, but there are so many important details that happened before this. So how does the story solve this issue? It uses flashbacks to tell what has already happened. Too many flashbacks actually. For the first half, the story can feel slow paced because it's showing you less of what's going on in the present and more about what has been set in stone. When you use a flashback, it works effectively because we have emotional context for the characters involved. This is why they don't work so well in the beginning of a story, because you haven't had the time to get emotionally invested in any of the characters yet. Eventually we do get to know who these characters are now, at which point flashbacks start to have the intended effect. So you might be asking yourself, Scotaku, why are you calling this a major unfortunate flaw? The solution presents itself with time. Well, that's exactly why this flaw is so big. A slow pacing and a cast of largely unrelatable characters at the time, along with a decidedly fickle audience, means that people are going to stop watching before these issues are resolved. This makes Yurikuma Arashi its own worst enemy in terms of success, and to answer the other half of the question, this is very unfortunate because this story is nothing short of beautiful. It not only explores the suffering of a minority in Japanese society, but the different facets of loss and love itself. Through the expansive cast we see desire, friendship, jealousy, and any other emotion tied to love that you can think of. Once it gets going, Yurikuma Arashi is at its finest when it reins in some nail-biting character drama, which only goes from strength to strength as the series continues on. The finale is a perfect culmination of everything we learn in the story, without necessarily being that ultimate, conclusive happy ending. The bleak reality of this Orwellian society is not understated, but what we do get is that little glimmer of hope, a precursor to an ideal society and even room for a potential sequel. As for what happens to our main characters, well, that's up to you to decide. We see the story through the lens of quite a few different characters. Out of all of them, Kuriha is our protagonist, a girl who is driven by revenge and a fear of loss. She goes through a lot of trauma, but most of it happens too early on in the story to have much meaning to us. And you can't characterise her on suffering alone. She vows never to back down on love, but this isn't enough to set her apart from the other characters like Ginko and Lulu, who also dedicate themselves to the pursuit of love. She is a good protagonist, however. She chooses to stand out from the crowd, though many would be glad to beat her back down. She fights against her own exclusion at every turn, and chooses to do only what she feels is right, though her own deep-seated fear of loss in any form can prevent her from following through. In the narrative, the protagonist is us, and if anything, her hesitation and thirst for vengeance makes her a relatable character. We can project ourselves onto Kuriha because she only does what anyone else would do in our situation, when faced with an unstoppable drive to stand up for love. Ginko comes off as a very blank, emotionless character at first. It takes us a while to get a grip on her. When we do, we realise that she's actually an enthusiastic character with a rough past. She's also capable of doing some very twisted things to further her own ends. In the second half, she is a terrific character. Probably the best character in the entire show, though at one point she blames herself for something that makes for a piece of slightly cheap drama. I think she was supposed to be a mysterious character in the first half of the series, but instead it felt like she was just underdeveloped. We weren't drip fed any information. Her companion Lulu is ear-seepingly obnoxious.
Lulu is going to work hard so she can eat lots of girls. You too, right, Ginko? She's Lulu's darling and Lulu loves her to bits and bits and bits!
She's technically supposed to be the comic relief, but her boundless enthusiasm can really grate on your nerves. She gets much more development than Genko in the first half, even though Genko is portrayed through the OP and DD as almost a secondary protagonist. The two of them almost steal the show from Kureha at times, being pitted directly against the conformist human society from the first moment they are on screen. They are a great couple of characters, two-sided and led by a passion for the same sex, even if Genko's development has a rocky start. Onto the supporting cast. Sumika is Kureha's boringly perfect love interest. She's this flawless, dainty little leaf of a girl who doesn't do anything to make us hate her, but never goes out of her way to make us like her either. She supports Kureha, sure, but she never stands in opposition to anything, much less the abuse that she and Kureha have to put up with. She is dedicated to love, but the same is true for Kureha and Genko and Lulu, and the list goes on. Her purpose does lie somewhere besides her characterization. She is someone we're supposed to share Kureha's connection to, but we never do. The Severance judges, Life Cool, Life Beauty, and Life Sexy, are a great laugh. A panel of grand, yet egotistical judges who preside over deals that several of the show's characters make with the Wall of Severance. The first villain, though I don't want to give away her name, is an absolute joy to watch. She is a scheming, manipulative, antagonising woman and she loves every minute of it. Also quite an erotic character, she does a good job of bringing the sexual undertones of the series uncomfortably to the forefront of your mind earlier on. She fills quite an interesting, welcome role later on in the story. There are other characters, but I don't want to go into spoiler territory. The characterization in Yurikuma Arashi, like the quality of its story, picks up pace the longer you watch. Some characters get a little too much development early on, while others don't get nearly enough. But when all is said and done, there are no characters who aren't built upon in one way or another, which is more than what can be said for some shows out there. The animation work for Yurikuma Arashi was done by Silverlink, who did a wonderful job of realising Ikuhara's vision with a crystal clear, adorable art style. It is a simplistic one, but that approach helps with the change of mood. The atmosphere can change from sweet and innocent to moody and oppressive at the snap of a finger without jarring you. It facilitates the different stylistic tones without one ever feeling out of place. The story is told in tandem with the visuals, with expository dialogue being a rarity. Even when stills are used to save on budget, the simplistic beauty of the artwork means that the visual quality feels consistent throughout. As it is a story about love and desire, characters do engage in frequent intimacy, but the series doesn't go for a fanservice angle with this. Shots never linger sexily on naked bodies, and while the absence of nipples where they ought to be can be an immersion breaker, I can appreciate a certain dedication to narrative over unwelcome fanservice. Not a single element of visual design is without purpose in the grand scheme of the story. Symbolism plays a heavy role in not only telling the story, but also announcing the presence of abstract concepts like desire or malicious intent. Although it isn't a technical marvel, the artwork and animation does everything in this series the justice that it deserves. It didn't need KyoAni levels of gorgeous detail or Shaft levels of Sakuga porn. It just needed to tell the story that Ikuhara wanted to tell, and under his direction, less is much more. The version of Yurikuma Arashi I watched was Funimation's English dub, which is crammed with industry veterans. There is scarcely such a thing as a bad Funimation dub. This series is not one of them, but it does take you out of it to hear Monica Ryle and J. Michael Tatum doing the same voice they've done in so many other dubs. Others like Alexis Tipton, Jamie Marquis, Colleen Clinkenbeard and Josh Grell try to distinguish themselves from their other roles with success, but they have provided their talent to so many extras in pretty much every Funimation dub ever produced, that you still only have to listen to a short clip to know that Funimation produced it. Like I said, it isn't a bad dub by any means. It is actually a wonderful dub for how completely it captures all of the material's meaning. Being so critically faithful to the original material, for a show of this nature is worthy of praise in itself, especially considering that this was a simuldub. But while these veterans are amazing at their job, if you've been listening to Funimation dubs for a long time, then you aren't going to hear the voice of the characters, you're going to hear the voice of the actors. If you haven't, however, then there isn't a single problem to be found with this dub. Onto the soundtrack, which is actually really good. The role of a soundtrack is to add to the tone of a scene, whether it is to make you quake with anticipation, cry with joy or sadness, or cheer for the protagonist. The soundtrack is as crucial a part of the storytelling process as the script itself. Yurikuma Arashi's soundtrack is full of a massive variety of emphatic tracks, most of which are even enjoyable to listen to on their own. Tracks like the bizarre Densetsu no Kabe prepare you for the alien experience of a largely allegorical story. Synth beat tracks like Yuri Labyrinth bring the atmosphere to a intense, yet conversational level, while light piano and jazz-infused tracks like Kizushite allow you to take a break from the dissection and soak in the sheer emotion of a scene. This soundtrack is a wonderfully bizarre, yet emotionally evocative work that fits the world of Yurikuma Arashi like a glove. The OP for the series is called Ano Mori di Materu, a gentle, soothing melody with an upbeat undertone. It is a perfect track to bring you into the soft, warm embrace of the show's atmosphere. Although the ED territory is a generic techno-pop song that doesn't really fit any aspect of the series. It's a good enough song, catchy and upbeat, but I just feel like it's mismatched with the gentleness of the rest of the soundtrack. The overall sound direction for this show, however, is endearing. Effects like and give you a giggle and are always welcomed with open arms when they make a return. Since these are built into the sound effects track, they are the same across the Japanese and English dubs. And a final word about the dubs, I don't think it's overly important which dub you choose to go with. They both do an identical job. The English dub simply removes the need to read subtitles. Sub-elitists and dub-onlys, read or listen to your heart's content.
For that is sexy Shabba da do.
Yurikuma Arashi is an unfortunate victim of the fickle nature of anime viewers in the modern day. If we think we aren't going to enjoy a show, then we have another 50 or so shows to choose from coming out around the same time. This show gets off to a rocky start, but rapidly picks up pace all the way up to the climax. That gradual improvement, paired with a lack of social context, means that many international viewers were quick to give up on this show. And although it suffers from flashback-itis and may be demanding of its viewers, this is just one of the reasons why you should watch Yurikuma Arashi. Not many directors out there have the guts to create a movie, much less a 12-episode television program that encourages its audience to put their brains to use and figure out the story itself. I'm overjoyed that directors like Ikuhara exist who are not only willing, but are renowned for creating interpretive works. When you do uncover the truth of the story, what you get is a unique and compelling narrative about real-world issues, wrapped in the warm, exuberant blanket of an adorable art style, and serenaded by an amazing soundtrack. The reason I went to the trouble of explaining the social context for this show earlier in the video was because anyone and everyone who understands what it is about should watch it. If you gave it a pass when it first came out or just haven't gotten around to watching it yet, then you are missing out on a modern Ikuhara classic. This beloved director still has it. Yurikuma Arashi is available in a DVD Blu-ray combo pack in the UK from Funimation. It is also available for legal streaming subbed on Crunchyroll and subbed and dubbed on Funimation now. If you like Ikuhara's allegorical storytelling style, then you might want to check out Mawaru Penguin Drum. At 26 episodes, this show is twice as long as Yurikuma Arashi. It tells the story of the Takakura siblings and their quest to obtain the mysterious penguin drum, and ultimately rescue their sister Himari from the clutches of death. Although many would argue that it is a less than amazing series, I still think it is worth a watch if you're a fan of Ikuhara's style. Or if you're in it for some Yuri and wanted some more, then I'd blindly recommend Sakura Trick. It's a more slice-of-life oriented show that follows the blossoming relationship of two high school girls that has received the praises of respected Yuri fans.
Sell your soul to the Yuri gods, motherfucker, no turning back.
Hopefully one of these will be to your liking. If you like this video and want to see more, remember to subscribe, or follow me on Twitter for the latest updates. Leave what you thought in the comments below, and until next time, cheerio. One day, the distant planet Yurikuma Arashi is an unfortunate victim of. If you like this video and want to see more, remember to fuck. When girls are very young, When girls are very young, there's also this state. At the other end of the candle is how erotic the show. They've made their sexuality an intrinsic part of. They've made the first half of the story. Once it gets going, Yurikuma Arashi is at its. She vows never to back down on love, but also. Tracks like the bizarre Dansetsu no Kabe Tracks like the bizarre Danzetsu no Kabe Tracks like the